Welcome to Keep It Moving. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm Marsha Jews, and we're here today we have several guests. Tracey Michae'l Lewis-Giggetts is a writer and educator, and she offers those who read her work and hear her speak an authentic experience, an opportunity to explore the intersection of culture, identity, and faith, spirituality at the deepest levels. She's a professor of English and Black Studies at the Community College of Philadelphia and the founder of Heart Space, a healing community created to serve those who have experienced trauma of any kind through the use of storytelling and the arts. As a writer, Tracey has published 15 books, including several collaborations with numerous high profile authors. In 2016, Tracey was honored by She Knows Media as one of the Voices of the Year for her nuanced and personal exploration of mental health, PTSD, and self care. 2021, Tracey became one of 20 writers who contributed to the groundbreaking book, You Are Your Best Thing. The vulnerability, shame, resilience, and the Black experience, edited by acclaimed researcher Bryn Brown and founder of the Me Too movement, Tarana Burke. Also forthcoming is her dynamic book, Black Joy, Stories of Resistance, Resilience, and Restoration by Gallery Simon and Schuster. Tracey has spoken on a number of platforms around the country on topics related to race, social justice, healing, and faith spirituality. Additionally, Tracey's freelance work has been published in print and online publications such as Oprah Magazine, The Washington Post, Essence Magazine, The Guardian, The Chronicle for Higher Education, Ebony Magazine, TheRoot.com, and more. It is my honor to introduce to you Tracey Michae'l Lewis-Giggetts. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Oh, girl, I am so tickled that you are here. I don't know what to do. So this is the book, y'all. This is
Ooh.
this right here. This right here is this right here. Wait, there it is. This needs to be on your nightstand. You need to buy it for everybody you know for holiday, Mother Day, Father's Day, every day. This book is a must see, must read. And I was in this whole book spellbound.
Hmm.
And you started off with the introduction, and I just did little notes throughout, right? And it says, Tracey, you're not very kind to yourself, sorting through challenges, myriad of ways you could have been kind to yourself. How many people need to hear that you are not being kind to yourself?
Mhm.
Please talk about that. This is just an intro, y'all. So let's be real clear. This is how she opens it up, right? Now that you have our attention, ma'am, would you please go into this deeper?
Yes. And I get, the feedback that I'm getting from people now is like, you didn't waste any time. You just drop us right in, right? And the thing is that I opened talking about this moment that I had with my spiritual advisor, my pastor at the time, who, was very clear, you're not very kind to yourself, Tracey.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of times we often, especially as Black women, sometimes define ourselves by what we do for other people, how we're pouring into other people, that we forget our names are very, very low on that list of things to do or people to serve. And so I think he was very clear in saying, let's roll back and let's think about the ways that you're not very kind to yourself. And that exploration led me to thinking about how self compassion, empathy, all of those kinds of things really play a part in how we're able to access joy and Black joy specifically. And so that was like the beginning of a journey for me.
And you start the introduction because see, I'm still stuck on this because we're gonna talk more about it. We got a whole hour, y'all. But this right here, it starts off. The introduction starts off. Does joy have a color?
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's the title of the introduction. And so as you go down, all of my identities, writer, wife, teacher, mother, were colliding into one another, and I needed a kind of extraction. How often, I know sometimes, and everybody else, if you start thinking about how you get bombarded. I was seeing you, like seeing little signs coming at you, that
Yeah.
you're driving and you're hitting. Can you talk about that more?
Yeah, I mean, to your first point about does joy have a color? One of the things, this book kind of was born from an essay that I'd written for the Washington Post about Black joy being a form of resistance. And one of the feedback that I got is, and that we tend to get as Black writers is, well, why do you have to make it about color? And why do you have to make it about, isn't joy for everybody? Doesn't everybody have joy? And so I wanted to be very clear up front that we all have access to joy. There is this universal experience of responding to pleasure and those kinds of things, but Black joy is a very distinct experience. It's housed in this melanin, in the historical situation and experience. Embedded in it is resilience. Embedded in it is this response to the world that has often tried to dehumanize us. And so there's a kind of defiance in our joy that we don't necessarily always see in other groups. But then, thinking about all of those identities and getting mired in those identities and not really feeling like I had a place where I could express my authenticity, who I was on the inside. I was constantly acting out these roles, right? Which were important. They were necessary. They were part of me. But, like you said, all of those little signs were pointing to this idea that I needed to identify what was joy, what was peace, what was those things that was inherent in me that I couldn't access, I couldn't find in my body and just in my life.
And that's really powerful because too often people will ask you or ask me, so what's wrong? What's going on? It's, I don't know. And you kind of, I don't know. And I
Right.
thought about, I don't know, as I was reading this and the pieces that were so cold-blooded, girl. What attempts are made to define what liberation and equity looks like for Black people? We often hear the language of striving and collective burdens, and it starts off with when attempts are made to define liberation and equity.
Yeah.
How come we can't just naturally have that without having to go through all the foolishness?
Well, the thing is that a lot of times, we have been, whether externally or internally, been defined by trauma. We've allowed ourselves as a collective to be very much defined by this generational trauma or generational hardship that's come down the line as a result of colonization and transatlantic slave trade and Jim Crow and redlining and police brutality and all those things. Very real issues, very harmful, very painful things. And I think what I was trying to do in this book was to say, yes, and right? And there's also generational strength and generational power and generational joy that we also have access, that was also passed down the line. I mean, Black joy is a catchphrase nowadays, right? But our ancestors have always known. Our ancestors have always moved in ways where joy was always the undercurrent, even when they weren't particularly happy. And I try to make the distinction between joy and happiness because even when things weren't particularly happy, there was an undercurrent of joy that they did not allow to be stolen from them, even in the midst of really terrible, horrible, horrifying things happening.
Does that relate to being out in the fields picking cotton and singing that song?
Yeah. It relates to all of those things.
Right.
It relates to the hand games that from
Yes.
a distance, from the big house may look like frivolous, may look like just, them out there doing them games or whatever, but was really intimacy and touch and sound and rhythm and joy and all of the ways that mattered. When certain things were taken away from us, we found ways to reinvent and to be innovative in how we created joy in our lives or brought up joy in our lives. Because I don't believe that we find joy. I don't believe that joy is outside of us. We have access to it. It is our birthright. It is present. It's a present alongside rage and grief and sorrow and love and all these other emotions. It's just that sometimes that other stuff gets big in our bodies, gets really, really big to the point where joy gets pushed down and we don't know what it feels like. We can't access it. And so we have to be kind to ourselves. We have to show self-compassion. We have to show compassion to each other so that we become bigger and joy can flourish within as well as in our actions.
And how we resuscitate ourselves is really critical to those next steps through our normal daily journey.
Yes.
Because resuscitation,
right? That's good.
Yeah, right? Right? Girl, I'm telling you, this book right here, I'm going to keep reading it because, okay. Self-compassion for ourselves as individuals creates a collective self-compassion that can support the demonstrations of our joy, period. The historical experience of Black folks in this country made being kind to ourselves a challenge. We did not have time to tend to our emotional and psychological wounds while dodging the master's whip, extending ourselves grace when we messed up. Despite what many white people would like to believe, joy absolutely can have a color, a race. Black joy is unique and deeply rooted in the cultural experience and expressions of Black people across the diaspora. Would you care to expand upon that, please? We're still in the introduction, y'all. That's all.
I felt like in the introduction, I needed to be very clear about what Black joy is and where it comes from and how it shows up. And the thing is that a lot of times, again, I got a lot of that feedback. Well, why is it got to be Black joy? And the thing is that it is very distinct. It is rooted in our historical experience. And here's the thing. You can't, if joy by itself is a universal human experience that we all have access to, where the dopamine and the adrenaline hits us and we will respond to something that is pleasurable to us, all of those things, all human beings have access to it. But guess what? Because of these events in history, that stuff there was an attempt to steal that from us, right? To take the access to that response from us. And so in order for us to add it back to the universal experience, I have to name it. I have to call it the thing that you took. I have to call it Black joy because it was the Black of that joy that you took out. Right. So now I'm going to put it back. And when I put it back, I'm going to name it as such because that's what was missing. And so I think, hopefully in explaining it that way, it allows people who may not get it to get it.
I don't, because it needs to be gotten.
Right.
It needs to be gotten. Exactly. And so, okay. So girl, this here is the Blacker the love. And we would just read the opening. Black love. I don't want to read the opening. You read the opening. You got your book handy, or you want me to read it? I know you do. Girl, that's a beautiful book too.
Okay. Let's see.
15.
Great. Okay. Yeah. The Blacker the love. Black love, Black don't crack love, except on the inside love. Black as the sun's graffiti on my skin love. Black undercover love. Black in the night love. So Black I fight love.
Keep reading.
Keep reading? Okay.
Yes.
Your slip is showing, baby. When the elder mothers of the old Black Baptist church of my childhood used to say this, my heart would swell. In my adolescent mind, pointing out that tiny bit of ivory lace hanging below the hem of my skirt felt like they were looking out for me. I just knew that I would never be caught out there because there was a line of Black women who had my back. And while I've long eschewed my slips, half joking that they were clearly weapons of patriarchy, I've never forgotten those feelings of safety and affection. Whatever the source, it felt like love. Keep going.
Yeah, girl.
There's something incredibly powerful about the way Black women love. It's at once sharp and pointed, edges honed by a society that too often downplays our genius or dehumanizes us altogether, while also being tender and omniscient. We just know things, not everything. But when it comes to matters that can't adequately be elucidated by words, we are connoisseurs of merging our knowledge, intellectual and or street, with our passion in order to get things done. When the world rightfully celebrated Stacey Abrams for assisting in flipping the state of Georgia blue in the 2020 presidential election, every Black woman knew exactly what was at work. It was our love rising above the name calling and defeats, not to save the nation, but to save ourselves and our babies. When Megan Thee Stallion took the SNL stage and demanded that the world face its denigration of Black women, we understood that also as a cry for healing. When Kamala Harris spoke directly to little Black girls in her acceptance speech, it was more than an affirmation, it was an infusion of love. Unfortunately, when we talk about Black women in love, it's too often couched in a conversation about men. It's generally relegated to the context of romantic relationships. And Black women certainly love our men, partners, sons, fathers, friends well. But the way Black women love one another is arguably just as potent. Keep going.
I think that you should just, until you say, girl, I'm going, it's not your turn.
Or you can pick up there if you want.
I'm gonna go from our love for one another shows up at the kitchen table when we're holding the hand of our homegirl who's grieving a loss so heavy that relief can only be found in shared tears and 7-Up cake. And then I want to jump from there to 17, where it says, I'll never forget a night out at a restaurant in Philly owned by a Black woman, where Black women not only served us, but also were responsible for the amazing gourmet soul food menu, seafood, mac and cheese, deviled eggs, anyone we devoured. I find myself looking into the glorious faces of 3 of my girlfriends, all Black.
Mm-hmm.
So in this Black joy, this whole, you're pulling together, and we still have some time, y'all, so we're gonna be talking about this for a while, and I'm excited. So I'm sorry if y'all don't mind, but I can't help it because I'm enthusiastic about this whole book, and I want everybody to read it. But want I also want you, Tracey, to really give us all of you in this book. And I want you to take this interview the way that your spirit is leading you, because there's so much. We're just here at the introduction, y'all. We ain't really made we ain't moved the needle far. But it's a book that I think every Black person needs to read and their children should read.
That's a blessing to me, because the thing is that that's what I hope for. You know, there are things that we pass down, right? And I want this book to be something that, you know, the mama and grandmama pass off to baby girl when she graduates and goes off to college, right? Or, you know, something that we give to a couple as they are navigating. I tried my best in this book, and I said to you a little bit earlier that I felt the most liberated on the page writing this book, and more than any other thing that I'd ever written. It was like I'd freed myself, and I said, I'm an English professor, but I'm gonna throw all the rules away. You know, I can come back to that in the editing process. What I wanted was for God, my ancestors, my own heart, my own experience to just show up on the page. In a lot of ways, I bled on the page. There's some deeply intimate pieces in here that was, to be honest, a little frightening to put out into the world. But I wanted to make sure that I talked about the breadth and depth of Black joy, right? Not just, spades games and, what we see on social media as Black joys, although I'm here for all of that, right? Like I love all the images of laughter and dancing and, just us, being with each other, the family reunion, the cookout, all of that. But I also know the joy shows up in like the way a mom advocates for her Black daughter, in a private school that tries to tell her that, her daughter with the big hair is too much, right? Which was my experience that I talked about. I wanted to talk about how Black joy showed up in, my first love, when I was 14 years old and, had my, salt and pepper haircut and thought, was like, let me, try to figure out what does love look like when the models that I had may not have been the best, right? How does Black joy show up when you have been the a survivor of sexual assault and sexual abuse? How does Black joy show up in our partnerships, in our relationships, in our marriages? I wanted to like cover it all. And so, that's why this book has these three movements of resistance, resilience, and restoration, because we hear Black joy as resistance. We know that defiance. We're going to dance even though you're trying to take us out. We're going to, it's all of those things that we know and understand about the fight as Black people. But I feel like that's only one piece of it. We have to heal. We have to heal whether or not we solve the issue of white supremacy and racial injustice. We got to heal anyway. And that's what grandmama and our ancestors understood, that as we're moving through, we have to be restored. We have to have resilience. We have to be alchemists and transform that pain into something. And so that's what I try to do, was just to cover all of that. And I didn't get all of it because Blackness is not a monolith and Black joy ain't monolithic. And, I missed a couple of ways it showed up, but that's what I was hoping to do. So, I'm loving to hear what you loved about the book, but I also have pieces I can read and we could go back and forth.
I want you to read now. That's what I want to do. See, these are called, I call them MIPs. Memories in Progress.
Ooh, I love it. Oh, I love that. Oh my goodness. So, okay, so I will read. There's a piece in the book. It's chapter 25 on 167 of the advanced copy. And one of the things that I think is so important when we think about our Black joy, I have to catch myself because I'm Gen X, I'm 46, my daughter is Gen Z and I don't even understand, right? And I have to remind myself that I'm trying to raise a free Black girl and that some of the things, there's a lot that I carry with me that I don't need to carry into future generations. And so like if we're at the park and she's screaming and she's being 10, doing what 10-year-olds do, because I am hyper vigilant and hyper conscious of whiteness, right? Sometimes, okay, you got to keep your voice down, and in the back of my mind, it's the thing that my mother and my mother's mother played in my head of like this idea that there's a certain respectability, right? There's a certain way to be that will keep us from harm. And we know that's not true now. We've seen that there is no way, if somebody is interested in harming you, they will. And so in this chapter, I talk about accepting non-acceptance. The reality is that respectability politics doesn't work because there's literally nothing you can do to prevent harm. And so why don't we lean into who we are as Black people, our culture, and all the ways that it show up, and lean into the non-acceptance. And so the piece that I'm going to read is the ending of that I think kind of really makes clear. One of the most powerful things Black folks can do is embrace our non-acceptance. This is where Black joy thrives. This is what resilience truly looks like. We know the story of how race as a construct came to be, but there is a pride that comes from watching what we did with it. When we eschew the original motives for these racial markers and decide to no longer center whiteness as the standard by which we will live, we unlock something dazzling. We Black. And each individual who is of African descent is their own brand of Black. No, we didn't choose this identity, particularly if we are descendants of the enslaved. We took that label and identity given to demean and brutalize us and created a whole people and culture. That's just what we do. You hand us the fat back of a pig and we use it to make savory greens. You hand us a fledgling radio station and we turn it into a media empire. You hand a Black man in prison a double life sentence in a bedpan and he might just make some baked macaroni and cheese out of it. True story. Well, at least as true as stories are on Instagram. We are alchemists. So, our ability to transform our lived experiences, even the ones plagued by trauma, is the very reason why we should internalize our acceptance and release ourselves from any obligation to be something other than who we are individually and collectively. I always want to stay clear of monolithic language when describing the Black experience. At the same time, I can't help but revere the fact that there are some really glorious distinctions and demonstrations of Blackness that show up all across the diaspora. And the full acceptance of that Blackness as a category all its own and not the shadow side of whiteness or some lesser subsection is critical to me. I suggest we lean into the fact that society doesn't fully accept us. Decide that cultural acceptance, while it has its privileges, doesn't ultimately serve us. It keeps us from our natural evolution as we twist ourselves into an image that was never ours to hold. Accepting ourselves frees us up to create pockets of joy where our Blackness is not treated as a burden because of our labor, but a blessing deserving of being focalized. I'm not suggesting at all that we deny or somehow believe ourselves to be above our identity. Actually, the opposite. We Black. We can be Black in a myriad of ways with a myriad of meanings. Yes, we didn't create the construct of race, but since it's here and is the foundation of how we must navigate this world, we will choose it. When we choose Blackness, which, as I've stated here, might mean choosing unacceptance, it's glorious. When we decide to wrap our arms tight around what Blackness means to us, hold it, love it, and yes, even interrogate it, then we snatch that construct out of the hands of those who thought they had the power to use it to make us inferior. We say, give me that Blackness and let me show you what I will do with it. Let me roll it between my fingers and in my mind. Let me set your intentions on fire and create something new, something that as colonizers, you'll desperately want later on. Let me create the bass line that holds your national melody together. I see you coming to steal it. But as soon as you do, I'll flip it again and you will need to overhaul your systems just to catch up. I will turn my gospel into blues, into jazz, into R&B, into rock, into funk, into disco, into hip hop. You'll look back over entire industries, and when you remove the mask, you'll only see our joy behind the creativity. We will lean into your non acceptance no matter how much it hurts, because deep down we know that on your best day, you could never. We're not sad if you don't like or love us. We have our oyster knives.
Girl, and then, after all that, after all that, it says powerful, even on your best day, but rolling it between your fingers, rolling it between your fingers, and then moving from gospel to it. All the industries have changed from one extreme to jazz to this. How do when you look at your world, right? And you, as you wrote this, what do you really see here? You see a race that wants to be more about being uh, the majority. That they have all of the answers. When I sit and I look at every major invention that has ever been made has been made by somebody that's got the melanin like I got, like we got in our skin, that you can't change you can't go from the gospel to the jazz to the this to the hip hop to the, and so you're making this whole, there's a whole arc of our abilities.
Yeah.
That more bigger than that, it keeps morphing into other things. And so now we've got this huge new generation that's coming out with things that all they do is put the exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, underscore, underscore over what white folks think they've already dealt with, and they already have. Now they got to refigure it all out.
Yeah, the thing is that is in essence our joy at work.
Right.
Right? Like it is, and that's the reason why I have to make the distinction between happiness and joy, because there's like I said, an undercurrent of something that remains steady. That old hymn, that this joy I have, the world didn't give it and the world can't take it away. Like it's this idea that we can take, this horrific circumstance, and we can transform it. And just when the colonizer believes that they could take that thing that we created, we transform it again, and we transfer. That's powerful. It's creativity, it's innovation, and it is what has kept us alive, Marsha. It is survival. But it's also, I feel like we're coming into a season with this new generation, as you said, where even the ancestors are speaking. It's like, yes, you're carrying on the things that we taught you, right? But now go on and see what the end's going to be. It's something, we're transforming it even into something that they couldn't have imagined. Right. And that's what I hope for. And I think part of how we get there is that we heal, right? We don't allow trauma to fester in our bodies and sit in our bodies. And I talk about the body a lot because I feel like that's the starting point of figuring out what joy is and how we enact joy in our lives. It's in our bodies first. It's how I figured out what joy was, so I can recreate it over and over again. And so, yeah, I mean, I think, like, that alchemy is who we are as a people. It's a defining characteristic, I think, of who we are as Black people.
And you put here in this page, I told you I've got, girl, I got the green things. May joy free you to ... Remember your first loves, see and be seen, honor the expansiveness of time, hold fast to your wonder, and declare yourself healed and free.
Yes.
I want you to expand upon honoring the expansiveness of time. That was deep. I was like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. What does that really look like?
Well, when I wrote that piece, every one of those kind of captions correlate to an essay that I've written about that topic. And one of the pieces that I wanted to play around with is time, because you know what they say about Black folks in time, right? They talk about colored people time, CP time, right? So, but I wanted to look into that. I wanted to explore, what does that really mean? What does time symbolize, right?
Yes.
And I think when we dig into our history and we look into, us as a people, we realize that the constructs of time that we have here today are really defined by Eurocentric perspectives and ideals. And that if we were to go a little bit further back, there's a much more expansive sense of time. I was actually looking for the piece because there's a really powerful quote in the essay that I would love to share with you, about time and how expansive it is, and how it's not. There's a reason why we show up when we show up.
There's a reason why.
Right.
There's a reason why.
And I think a lot of people just don't have not, they just don't know. Right. And so we align ourselves with sort of this Eurocentric perspective, when in all actuality, part of who we are as a people. I'm not saying, 'cause I know people will say, oh, you just want to be late. I'm not saying that. Here it is. I found it. African ideas of time are highly philosophical. Time to them is beyond the natural socio-cultural phenomena. It is also understood in its ontological conception. The person in BT has effectively used the Swahili word zamani to describe the stretches of time into timeless eternity. The Yoruba people also see time beyond what is experienced physically. It stretches to the period of the life after death and the realm of the ancestors. So this idea of like past, present, future, lateness is all kind of blended together when we
Right.
think about, West African traditions and where many of us, not all of us, but many of us come from. And so I wanted to play around with that a little bit and what our ancestors understood. I say our ancestors' understanding of time when separated from the influence of colonization and westernization feels way more expansive. If Black peoples around the world were to return to a three-dimensional 360-degree view of time, particularly in relation to how we move through the world, I suspect that our notions of what is important to do in any given moment would change also. Think what it means if you had a 360 dimensional sense of time. How would you use it to access joy, to be intentional about joy or peace or love or relationship? Right. I get caught up in that. Like I have deadlines. I'm a writer. Right. And so I'm pushing off my daughter saying, we'll get some one-on-one time later. I've had a 360 degree of time and wasn't so locked in. Right. And it's hard not to be, clearly, right? But to
It
be
is.
locked into like time and being someplace, when we say we were going to be there, I think that our relational experiences would be different. Our personal experiences will be different. And that's what I try to like play with in that essay.
But I think also too that, we sometimes for me, time has no end
Mm-hmm.
because whatever I can't, I don't, okay, I can't be confined in that.
Yes.
There's, it's, it's suffocating.
Mm-hmm.
It's suffocating. How do you, and people want you to be in this manner because I call it, I need my brain to breathe.
Yes. Yes.
Right? I need
Mm-hmm.
my brain to breathe. And it's hard to tell somebody that you are suffocating me. You're
Mm-hmm.
suffocating me. So I use my I can't make my brain breathe.
Yeah.
My brain can't breathe. And it really is because it seems like too often all of the powers that be are closing in.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is that our great grandmamas and grandmamas knew that. I don't know if you recall, but in my experience, my great grandmother used to say, hold on, I'm resting my eyes. Right?
Yes.
It used to sit and like for 30
Yes.
minutes or 45 minutes and rest. And there was this idea of, no, they're not going to let me go take a nap. No, they're not going, but I'm going to take my time. I'm going to let my brain breathe. Right?
Yes.
You're going to, my notion of how I'm going to use this time is very different. That's a very West African concept that you're talking about, where you're saying that, it's never ending. Right? And sometimes the powers that be want to lock us in.
Too often. I think it's more often than sometimes,
Yeah,
right? And
absolutely.
and especially when we start looking at a corporate environment, so like the new hotness is diversity and inclusion, and
Yes.
that's important, right? It's really important. But there's other parts to diversity and inclusion that also speaks to the spirit of the person that you're dealing with.
Yes.
And you have to be delicate with that spirit. You can't just um, race through and have this expectation that that employee or that person is going to be okay
Yeah.
because you haven't considered the feelings, the emotional aspect of what you've just done, or and they don't care in
Right.
many cases because they don't even want you there. And how'd you get that job? And I really wanted Bob because to get the job because I know
Right.
Bob's mama and everybody. So,
Right.
how do you find that balance in yourself and how we function in an environment where white people, too many of them are still in fear.
Yeah. The thing is that, capitalist systems don't honor that expansiveness. And then, I mean, even moving it out of the realm of race to just neurodiversity and the way people think, and is way more expansive than the constructs these
Right.
structures and these systems have in place, what they expect. And so I think part of what we have to do, and I say this in a very measured way because I understand the privilege in me saying this, is that we have to take our time. We
Mm-hmm.
have to commandeer and return back to making space for rest and making space for the ways that we think and the way, that we move. But I also recognize the privilege of that, because some people don't have the resources or the ability to be able to bend that way, right, to be authentic in that way. And so I'm very cautious about saying, oh, you know what, you just need to tell them to, that you think this way, or tell them you need to make time for your rest, or you need balance. I think ultimately we do need to do that, or find ways to do that,
Mm-hmm.
or try to, if you're going to be part of those systems, infiltrate them in such a way so that you can give that back to people, right? So that when I talk to diversity and inclusion and equity folks, that's what I talk about. Yes, you got Black folks here, but what are you doing to create brave and safe spaces for these people now that you brought them in, right? Because they're still entering environments where they are first this and first that, and people
Right.
are not receiving them in that way. They're still dealing with the fear, as you said, and even some of that deep-rooted generational hatred that they don't even know exists. It doesn't even rise up until they're having to be in an environment with a person that's different from them. So how are you creating safe spaces for these Black folks now that you done diversified this space? Now what are you doing? What are you offering? So diversity is one piece, but then what? Right?
But see, then there's this whole thing of maliciousness,
Mm.
right? And I need to share something with you, because I think this is the perfect place to share an experience that I had back in the 70s, or
Okay.
whatever year it was,
Mhm.
sometime. And there was a military general, so I'm not going to say um, what department. He
Mhm.
was a general, 1 star, and he was new to the organization. And I was a senior executive, but I was the only Black thing in there.
Mm.
So these were all military personnel. And he used to run every morning at dark 30, and he'd come into the office like at 6 a.m., right? And, Margaret Armstrong says she doesn't suffer fools lightly. And so I took that on, right? I
Mhm.
said, okay, I'm going to just let him do. But when he would come to work, he would take the back of my chair. I had those big Naugahyde chairs back in the day.
Mhm.
You probably were in kindergarten back then. My daughter was in elementary school. But anyway, he'd come in and he'd take a sticky and he'd put it on the back of my chair. So by the time I got from Bethesda to Arlington, the whole back of my chair was full of, but they weren't real stickies, and they were just little piece of paper that he would
Mhm.
tape, because the stickies weren't out back then.
Right,
He had
right.
taped them all over my chair. So before I could sit down, I had to take all the little piece of papers off. So one day I just decided, the Lord said, you got to make a decision, and you got to, pray and do whatever you need to do. You
Mhm.
get one opportunity to make a life decision, right? And
Right.
so this was going to be a life decision. Girl, I went in there with all those little pieces of paper, and I said, if you ever do this again, I'm going to beat your blah, 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 blah. And he looked at me and he said, well, and he got on the phone and he called all the other guys, because I was the only little Black thing in there, and all the
Mhm.
little colonels and all that. They all come in, they're looking at me. And he said, say again what you just said to me. And I said it again, and they all started laughing. And I was like, what? So what?
Right, right,
And
right.
they said, and so they said, we were just waiting to see what you were going to do.
Mm. Mm.
They were waiting to see what I was going to do. And the thing that's so deep about it is that now, 20, 40, 30 years later, I'm still talking about it, because
Mm.
it was really a profound thing that these men, white males, it was a test, and to see, can you hang here? Do
Right.
you really belong here? What are you going to do? Are you just going to be a punk and walk out and your little feelings are going to be hurt and blah, blah,
Right.
blah? That was I don't know if it was about me being black or woman or both,
Both.
right?
Probably, definitely both.
Right. So the point of it all is that who are we as a people, and these are the kinds of things, and that's just something 100 years ago, but it's not too long ago because somebody else experienced something similar not too long ago today in
Absolutely.
2022.
It's still
And how
happening.
Mhm. And how do you it with all of this, how do we keep our sanity through all this?
Hmm.
Through the mind games, through the demonstrative actions. How do we as a people continue to maintain our joy, our black joy, through this process
Yeah.
of
You know,
being?
I honestly, I think that's where that restoration movement of the book comes in. I think it's
Mhm.
about we have to shift our focus just a little bit from all the ways that we resist, right? And then,
Right.
which is fantastic. You stood up for yourself. You said, "Listen, do it again here," right? And
Mhm.
that is necessary and that's important. But then when we leave those spaces, we have to tend to our souls and
Right.
tend to our heart, because a lot of people, they're encountering those kind of microaggressions, whatever you want to call it. I call it racism because that's what it is,
That's
or
what it is.
sexism,
Yep.
and they're encountering these things on a regular basis, and it's just like nipping away and chipping away at their souls and their
Mhm.
hearts. So I
Mhm.
say we build practices. That's prayer, if that's what you do. That's meditation. That's therapy, which I know sometimes is still a stigma within our
Yes.
community.
But how do we get past that?
More people need to be talking about it. That's why I open up and I talk very specifically about the therapy work that I've done here. That I did EMDR, eye movement desensitization, and reprocessing trauma therapy, deep trauma. Like I think more of us talk about it, and I am seeing a shift, right? Like
Okay.
we're seeing Black folks on television and the media going to therapists. It's starting to be part of the lexicon. But I think a lot of times in the communities where it's really needed, there's still this sense of, no, I'm just going to pray about it, or I'm just going to
Mhm.
deal with it because that's just
Mhm.
how they are,
Mhm.
And I think, that work, and also creating, brave spaces for ourselves, getting back to those community centers that we do, so whether that, people don't, the salon is not the salon like it was back in the day, right? Where you
Right,
would
because you
go.
open up. Mhm.
Exactly, and you felt like, even though there might have been some foolishness going on, you felt safe there. You felt like that was a space where you could share and you could talk. So
Right.
I feel like that doing those things are what is going to begin the healing work. And when we do the healing work, it comes back around again because now we are equipped and ready to stand up again and to resist again. So we resist, we do our healing work, healing gets us to a certain point, and now we can resist again, right? And so on and so on.
But too often we have so many um, secrets,
Mm,
where the
yeah.
little bones are buried in all these different little places, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, they are down in there, girl. They're just down in there, and my daughter says, oh, "Okay, so everything must be in the vault now."
Exactly.
It's in the vault. And how do we get it out of the vault when we're really not ready to talk about that trauma? We're really not ready to talk about that pain. We're really not ready. But you're not ready, but you're almost 100 years old. When are you going to be ready?
Right.
And what's that impact along the way because you weren't ready?
Yeah. That's a very good question. I think one of the biggest things, I say that to my mom all the time. I was like, there's just some things I tell her, I said, there's just some things you just gonna go into the grave with, right? Like you telling me right now, you just going to the grave with it, because it's just that idea that, I mean, she comes from a generation that says like, we don't air your business, you don't talk about what goes on in this house, those kinds of things. I think, but what I have noticed is the more that I speak, and the more that I share, because I am more transparent and more vulnerable, it gives her permission to share a little bit more and a little bit more. So I think that's the only way that, you can't make somebody be ready, right? But I think the more we become in tune with our bodies, because our bodies tell us some of
Yes.
these aches and pains that we have is
Mm-hmm.
trauma trapped in the body. It's those
Mm-hmm.
stories trapped, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times part of being well and physically well has to do with being mentally and emotionally and spiritually well, right? And so I think, while you can't make someone share their heart or share a traumatic experience, I think that creating the environment and the space where it's safe to do so allows people to kind of inch out a little bit and maybe tell a little bit here and there. And the truth of the matter is, courage is about doing it afraid. Courage is not the absence of fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is that
Mm-hmm.
I am afraid, but I'm going to do it anyway. I
Right.
don't want to share this, but I know this thing is going to help my daughter or my granddaughter heal. So I'm going to give them a little bit of me because I know that I want to carry on in the future. And I mean, that just, has to be part of the journey for everyone. And everybody's at different stages and different phases, and that's okay too.
And that's okay too. Yes, we have to go to work. Yes, we have to take care of the kids. Yes, we have 50 million other necessary things we have to do during our days. But what if those things only served as the background to things we are really focused on?
Mm,
What if we planned for all our joy moments, made a list of all the things we plan to do in a day that will bring us joy and serve our souls? So we know we have to drop off our kids at school, our child at school. But what if we write in singing the latest Beyonce Girl Power anthem at the top of our lungs along the way?
yes. One of the things that I was talking about in that piece, that essay, was this: my daughter, she is like the classic demonstration. She's the epitome of joy. And so one day, it was daddy daughter day, and she was going out with her dad. And so she made a list of all the things that they were going to do. She does that all the time when we have our mommy daughter. It's like, okay, we're going to make waffles, we're going to do, we're going to go to the swings, we're going to do all of these things. Right now, she still has chores. She still has things that she has to do, for homework to finish, all those kinds of things. But those things weren't on her list. It was the joy stuff that was on her list. She knows she has to do that. Those weren't things that were going away, but the things that she prioritized were the things that gave her joy. And I said, what if we took, a page from our children, and maybe we prioritize those joy moments, even in the midst of all the 5011 things that we got to do?
Mhm.
What if we tried it?
But suppose we tried it, it doesn't.
Then we try something else. We I lost you. I can't hear you.
Until
Okay.
it works. Until
Until
it
it works.
works.
Until it works. But that's where the process comes in. Because if you identify what joy feels like in your body and you figure out what brings you joy, then the stuff that you're going to line up are things that are related to what brings you joy. So I
I'm gonna
love
talk
singing
to your mom.
Beyonce at the top of my lungs, right? So I know that if I'm driving my child to school, if I want to have a little bit of joy because I know I got a long day, I can do that with her, have a moment with her, get a little joy in before I enter this classroom and deal with
Mhm,
these students,
mhm,
right? But
mhm,
that's just me. Somebody else, it might be somebody else, it might be silence. Let's have a moment of silence.
mhm.
Whatever brings you joy and gives you peace, write that into your day.
And too often, we think that we know what we're doing,
Mm,
but is there really a book? You know what I mean? That
right. It's not.
because it's not one size fits all,
It's
right?
not at all.
And even with different children and different people and different husbands, the whole nine yards. But we're going to have to wrap this up. But give us some parting words on Black joy, stories of resistance, resilience, and restoration. This is a powerful book that I would recommend every household that you know should have it at home.
Hmm.
And I think it's really good conversation for after dinner or during dinner to just sit and kick it around, because there's a lot of things that we put in the vault, a lot of things we don't need to put in the vault, that just keep festering. They
Yeah.
just keep festering. And my daughter says it all the time, you got to get rid of the vault, Mom, for real. This right here, you got to deal with that, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
give us some parting words, and we want everybody to buy the book.
Yes. You know, first, let me just say thank you to you. I've made it a commitment that for every interview that I do, that I make sure that that person knows that I give them their flowers, and I want to give you your flowers for everything that you do, for the conversations that you have, for every person, author, entity that you talk to and that you bless with your presence and with your voice and with your insight. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I definitely wanted to make sure that I get a chance to say that, because you are needed and seen and loved, and just thank you. Um, yes, go buy the book, but what I will say is, you know, if a lot of people like, oh, you're the Black joy expert, and I'm really not, and because there is, like you said, no one size fit all. I'm a person who has lived and has a story and wants desperately for our people to have joy and to have peace, and to be able to navigate this world that doesn't oftentimes look at us the way we look at ourselves, see us as who we are, who we really are, how God sees us. And to begin to do that work, to go on our own joy journey. So I figure, if people read this book and they have those conversations, if they begin to identify what joy feels like in their body, they begin to be intentional about creating moments of joy for themselves, writing it into their days or their weeks, and then they share that with the next person, then my job is done. And so I just want people to know that there's a book out there that will make you laugh and cry and do all those things, that is for us, by us, and that they can take this book and really use it to begin their own healing journey. That's all I want. That's all I've ever wanted in writing it.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm a reader. We had the bookmobile back when I was growing up, right?
I
And
loved it.
I've been on the Enoch Pratt Library Board. I mean, I'm a book
Mm,
girl. So
yeah,
this is not something taken lightly. This
yes.
this is serious for me. But moreover, the information that you really have put in here is self-help if you
Mm,
really take the time. Kerry Washington says on the top of the book, her quote, "a necessary testimony on the magic and beauty of our capacity to live and love fully and out loud." And
yes,
that's real.
yes.
That's real.
Absolutely.
Tracey Michae'l Lewis-Giggetts, thank you so much for honoring us with your presence, for giving us this book. It is really, really powerful. And I could talk about this book with you for hours. Thank you for being such a joy and having the openness to share, and the vulnerability that you have set aside and said, I'm pushing through and making this happen. And I'm grateful, ever so grateful.
Thank you
Y'all,
so much.
please go buy this book. You really need this book. You need this book in your household for real. Thank
Amen.
you very
Thank you.
much.
Thanks.
And we'll be right back with B. Keith. Yeah, B. Keith. We are so excited about B. Keith coming, because B. Keith has been doing the daggone thing. So we'll be right back with B. Keith Fulton, who is the chairman and CEO of Soulidifly Productions. We'll be right back. Just a second. Okay, thank you. B. Keith Fulton, chairman and CEO of Soulidify Productions, is an award-winning filmmaker and author of 11 books, including the popular Mr. Business, an 8-book children's series, and the Amazon top seller, The Tale of the Tea, National Nonfiction Book Award winner in the um, in the children's series. He founded Soulidify Productions, a full feature film, stage, and TV investment and production company designed to promote a more inclusive narrative in major media. Soulidify produced 4 feature length films, in 2018. Four, a first in the history of independent cinema. River Runs Red, Atone, One Angry Black Man, and Love.com. The Social Experiment. Soulidifly also co-produced a biopic on the legendary Sheriff Bass Reeves titled Hell on the Border. Distribution partners include Lionsgate, Freestyle Digital Media, Netflix, Amazon Prime, Gravitas Ventures, and Urban Home Entertainment. The company's first stage production, Thoughts of a Colored Man, released on Broadway in 2022. It's the first Broadway production in history to feature an all African American male writer, director, and cast. Reviews have been glowing, with one publication noting that Thoughts is the most important play of the 21st century. Soulidifly also publishes Soul Vision magazine and owns Soul Vision TV, delivering over 500 hours of positive and inspirational streaming television via Apple TV, Amazon Fire, Roku tablets, smart TVs, and all mobile phones worldwide. In 2022, the company will release two new films, two novels, and pre-show. The first app in the world that will allow members to enjoy gaming, media, and theatrical entertainment for free. We're going to stop here and bring in B. Keith Fulton to talk about that. You know what? Let me just say, so this is a lot. I don't know how you must have a team of 9,000, and Mrs. Fulton is right there by your side making it happen. This is wonderful, and this is just the beginning. So I didn't want to waste time just reading this amazing bio, but anybody who is subscribing to the newsletter, the bios in the newsletter, if you're not subscribing, make sure that you send it to WKIM Media Network Marsha@gmail, and we'll get it to you, because it's got all his information. But I want to talk to him because we got a whole hour for him to talk about all these aspects. Hey, BK, what's good?
Hey, how you doing, Marsha?
I've known him at least a little while.
For a minute.
So how
can you see me all right? You got my good side?
I see you. You doing all that? Yeah, there you go.
I'm in the movie business. We got to make sure we popping and blocking.
And the lighting's all right. You know, we got it all
Look,
right.
I got this little circular thing happening.
I know. Did you have a little music coming on you? I'm so proud of you, man.
Thank you.
Okay, so we met. I think you were at the National Urban League back then, running everything.
Yes.
And look at you now.
How about that? Started from the bottom, now we here.
You didn't start at the bottom. Boy, don't even try it. Because when there wasn't at the Urban League, I met you when you were at AOL.
Okay,
so that goes way back, right?
It does.
Right, because that was when Larry Irving was over at Commerce.
Department of Commerce, that's right, Undersecretary, yep.
Yeah, so there you go. Let's talk about this journey, right?
Okay.
Because you've done big corporate work. Let's talk about some of the corporate work that you have done. So Time Warner, Verizon, we've already mentioned that, the National Urban League, the headquarters. And so you go from this to all this creative side. I mean, and you didn't just go to the creative side like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to paint some little something. You said, I'm going to do feature films and I want to go on Broadway.
Right.
How'd you make this huge transition? What happened? Let's start from back in the day. You were born, and what was going on in your world for you to have this panoramic view? Because you're really talking left and right brain kind of guy, right?
Right. Both my parents are educators. My dad's a math teacher, retired. My mom's an English teacher, retired. And they always kind of poured into me that I could do whatever I wanted to do, that I could do whatever I was willing to work for. I started my first business when I was 10 years old with my parents' support, and I couldn't drive. I had a landscaping business. So how you going to get to customers' jobs and you can't even drive? Well, I got my dad to give me a ride, and I used his equipment, took some of his customers, and they played along. And so throughout the experience growing up in Hampton, Virginia, and Newport News, Virginia, there were books, there was a way to explore my curiosity. My writings were encouraged. So my mom has produced stuff that I wrote when I was 5 and 6 years old. And so I wrote a story about a bunny rabbit when I was like in kindergarten or something like that. And she kept that and sent it to me recently. And so what ends up happening, though, when you grow up in that rich environment, you develop a level of resilience, confidence, tenacity, and curiosity that can serve a lifetime. And for me, it's not always been a crystal stair, but even at moments when I've been uncertain, I knew that if I could find the right kind of mentor or the right kind of book or the right kind of resource, I didn't have to reinvent the wheel. I could learn from what other people did and then get out of whatever I was into and build on the learning to become the best version of myself. And so what you see now, vice what you saw when we were much younger, is a person who's just continuously learned and kept applying myself and reinventing myself. And I'm having a ball.
But you're reinventing yourself in the most extraordinary ways, right? So you're not just going out for like the little ice cream stand on the corner. You're really going into corporate. So you clearly were doing an analysis of sorts where you were in all of these corporations getting a real understanding of how to make all that work, right?
Well, let me tell you this, because it might surprise people that the success for me didn't really start in the corporate world. The success in the corporate world was an outgrowth of finding, as the previous guest talked about, that joy in being who you are and becoming your authentic self. So I found the Black joy in the library. And here's the deal. So I was at engineering school at Virginia Tech,
Right.
and I was flunking out. Marsha, I was dancing, I was playing basketball.
Not you.
I was doing everything except what I was supposed to do and flunking out fast. I started getting these nasty grams from the registrar. Mr. Fulton, you're going to be on probation, blah, 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 blah. And so I literally went to the library to plan my escape from Virginia Tech.
Okay.
And I found myself in the E185.5 section of the Dewey Decimal System. Now, in the Dewey Decimal System, the E185.5 section is the section on Black folk. So I think it was God that put me there. It was a big old library. And that's the section I ended up in. And, divine serendipity is what happens when God puts you in proximity with the people or institutions you need to meet or work with to give love a chance. And so I found myself in the E185.5, and I'm reading about Lewis Latimer and Granville T. Woods and Elijah McCoy. And I'm like, wait a minute, they invented lights and electric third rail. And when we say the real McCoy, we're talking about a brother. I didn't know that. And so that put rocket fuel into my experience as a college student. And so I literally went from the probations list to the dean's list to the board of directors of the university. I was flying in a jet to go and govern the institution. So, it's like free your mind and your ass will follow. And so it was those books that freed my mind. It told me that I could do anything. And here's the picture, here's the patent, here's the proof. And so it wasn't making it up. It's just the stories that we don't get. And we need to read the right books, need to read the right stories. That's why I applaud your show. You're bringing on people that's pouring life and love into our community. And once a person embraces who they are, with all the confidence that we know we're capable of, because we're all wonderful and divinely made, then it's something to see. Watch out. And so I love it. And so for me, then, fast forward, creating the movie business or the media empire was me trying to tell these stories and get more of these stories to more people. Because if reading about them could change my life, then if I could put it on the big screen and put it with great acting and great music and great scripts, I might be able to change it to multitudes. And so that's what we're trying to do.
But it's not without some pain going through this, right? Because you got to navigate all of the pieces that are in the way. So you did that. You went through that process. You stood in what EX, whatever it was.
E185.5.
E185.5. That needs to be a logo somewhere. Really, you shouldn't think about that. But
okay.
But it's really important. And we were talking earlier that, reading is a passion of mine. I'm that girl with the bookmobile, right?
Mm-hmm.
But how do you now, in looking at all that you're doing, I mean, you just a movie just came out with folks who are top liners. Talk about this movie, because you've made this leap and you've been making these steps along the way. And I'm sitting here trying to figure out how I can do this without being just so blatant, but I just don't know how else to do.
Well, be blatant, be you. Don't worry about it.
So BK is a principal with Ralph Sampson in Winner's Circle Ventures.
Yep.
$100 million strategic investment company targeting women and minorities. Prior to becoming a full-time author and media entrepreneur, BK was vice president of the Mid-Atlantic region, Virginia, Maryland, DC, and Delaware for Verizon Communications, that was a $5 billion revenue base, and president of Verizon Virginia and West Virginia. And then he has held leadership, media, technology, and policy development posts with the U.S. Department of Commerce, AOL, Time Warner, Verizon, FiOS TV, and founder of Community Studio and the National Urban League, first NPO in the world to broadcast a conference over the internet. BK is also an inventor, easy reader, an investor, a philanthropist, and he's considered one of the most influential African Americans in technology. His thought-leading papers on technology, media, and community building are permanently archived at the Smithsonian Institute. He is trained as an intellectual property lawyer and serves on the boards of Norfolk State University, Town Bank, Air Wireless, Preshow.co, Virginians for Reconciliation, the Joan Trumper Mulholland Foundation, Library of Virginia Foundation, the Lewis Latimer House of Museum and Media Mentors, the Jamestown Yorktown Foundation, Boone Castle Media and Entertainment, and MediaU.com, the first global online film school with UC Systems transcripts. He's the chairman of seven companies, including Soul Vision TV, Aero Technologies Emeritus, Body Snatchers Productions, Encrypted Sensors, Encrypted Grid, and founding editor of Soul Vision Magazine, a member of, I didn't know you were Q, Omega Sci-Fi, the Da Vinci Center Angel Advisory Board, the Pure Genesis Advisory Board, the Global Advisory Board of Education for Sharing, E45, the Executive Leadership Council, and the Boule. He holds a bachelor's degree in urban affairs, and planning, with 2 years of computer engineering and architecture at Virginia Tech, a master's of science degree and Sloan Fellowship in management and policy analyst, Harvard's Kennedy School of Government and the New School's Milano School of Management and Policy Analysis, and a Juris Doctorate in intellectual property, electronic commerce, and telecommunications law, New York Law School. And he's the father of twin boys and is married to Jacqueline E. Stone, Esquire. And you can go to Soulidifly.
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 That's
Soulid.
FLY.
Fulifly.com.
You got it.
You got it. This is a lot, but I want you all to go up online and go to his website so that you can see the whole expanse of everything that he's doing, which is, I need to get a teleprompter so I don't have to look at these little tiny words. But I'm going to tell you something.
Yep.
In looking at these big dreams that you had and then you brought them to fruition, how did you start bringing them together to be able to get them to market?
Write them down.
What does that mean? Write it down.
Write it down.
Vision.
So when I was after I had that experience in the library, I call it my awakening. I then went and wrote a 60-year plan.
Mm.
And just like I read about those great heroes and sheroes, I looked up additional people that I respected and used their life as a blueprint. So I studied Ron Brown, Vernon Jordan, Marianne Spraggins, Dick Parsons, and I took the common denominators of their experiences and I made them part of this blueprint, my plan. And I figured I would do what they did until I knew how to do better. Then I'd add my own scaffolding, my own dreams to fill out my blueprint. And so for the last 40 years, I've been following my plan. And it works. When you have a plan written down, then things come up. Life is dynamic. Bless you. Life is dynamic and things will come up. So I would weigh all opportunities against my blueprint. And if it didn't help my blueprint, I didn't even consider it. If it helped my blueprint, I would consider it. You don't always do everything that's presented to you, but at least you know if it pushes along the right trajectory, then you can consider it. And so that's how I was able to navigate and keep going forward and up. And then by following these lives already well lived, I knew that if I do everything they did, I had a chance. You see, what I try to tell people is this: the win is in the work. God blesses all of us to turn our dreams and ideas into their tangible equivalents. But you have to have the faith, be willing to do the work, and expect the outcome. And then the magic happens. I mentor a lot of young people, and I go to a lot of conferences, and they say, well, hey, why are you working so hard? You retired. And I'm like, yeah, well, I'm retired from one job, but I'm doing some other things now. I'm really doing what I want to do. And so you might get an email from me 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And they said, but if you're retired, why are you sending emails at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning? And then I tell them, I work while you sleep so I can live like you dream. And they're like, oh. And then there's always somebody smarty pants say, well, you can't be having no fun because I don't never see you at the club. And I was like, well, au contraire, I'm having a lot of fun. By the way, I never see you at the bank. Boom, drop the mic. Then they began to get it, because life is about having fun, but it's also about being productive and being able to create something that allows you the freedom to create more and to spend more time with the people you love and the people you admire. You know, I do a lot of things. Part of it is to show people that we don't have to be in any particular box. On the cover of my last book, which won the Nonfiction National Book Award, is a Dr. George Grant. And he invented the golf tee. The name of the book is called Tale of the Tee. He also was the first Black professor at Harvard and was a dentist. Our ancestors, if you look back, have always done many things and done them well. And we can do many things and do it well. You know, sometimes I get worried about folk who don't have these stories that I know, because then the least little obstacle they run into, it shuts them down. And what I want them to know is that when our ancestors were doing what they were doing, those amazing things, they had the whole world stacked against them. No civil rights, couldn't go to the bank and get loan, couldn't travel interstate, couldn't even go to the bathroom in some places. And they still achieved. We are the Steph Curry, LeBron James, Michael Jordan of resilience and tenacity. All of us. That's the DNA we carry. And so when you start tapping into it, the magic happens. I do these things and more because I know who I am. Readers become leaders. Y'all better go get the right books.
That's really interesting, though, is that too often we don't even see what we can do. We don't see ourselves there because it seems bigger than what that dream seems bigger than what this looks like right here.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And having to take that step. The step for you was being in that aisle and seeing people who look like you at a time that wasn't popular for them to even think about, let alone make it happen. Right.
Right.
But that seems to have been this this new little spirit that got locked in to yours, right?
Absolutely.
That kept you moving up that path. Now, and the other day when we were on the phone, you were talking about you were going to go and talk to the kids about the books.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. So
let's talk about that, because you have Bruce Willis on your latest movie, so we're going to talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
But now we're at the school with the kids and the books. So
Right.
I want you to talk about the school and the kids with the books.
So today I was reading to about 50 children in Richmond, and I read my latest children's book called Video Games. It's a book about when I was going to run away, and I packed my bags because my mom wouldn't let me play video games and made me come home to eat. And then they sent me to my room, and I was upset, so I was going to run away. And I packed my video game and my controllers and my skateboard, and then had this heavy suitcase. And I went to the backyard and looked, and I saw this field and this road. I didn't know where the airport was at. I was like, man. And I turned around and looked back at the house, and I saw my dog Rusty, and I saw my bicycle, and I saw the encyclopedias my parents had bought for me. I'm like, I don't know where I'm going, but I don't know if they have any of the stuff that I like. I may want to stay here. And so I stayed here. So the kids and I, we had a little fun with it. And but the book, it's called The Adventures of Little BK, Mr. Business, The Adventures of Little BK. And it's about my life when I was young, like about third grade. And so it's, books about wearing glasses or the first day of school, or somebody calling you something that's not nice and how to respond to it, appropriate touch. So I deal with a lot of important issues, but in a kind of fun way. One of the other things kind of that's important about the series is that it's always, little BK on the cover, little brown boy. And, statistically, only about 3% of books have a child of color on them, on the cover. And so a black child, a brown child is more likely to see a dog, a cat, a rabbit, or a humanoid on a book than to see themselves. But the research says that when children can see themselves as characters or on covers or in the pages of books, they're like twice to 5 times more likely to believe they can accomplish what the characters accomplished in the book. And so at the end of the day, representation is critically important. And there weren't a lot of books for children, especially brown and black children, that showed them winning regularly. And I make sure the books are inclusive. But Mr. Business, Little BK, is always on the cover. And there's always these clues about what's in the book. And then the book always ends with something, and then a little quote or something at the end that's about love or a value or a principle. And so families love them. I had this one grandfather, and he bought the first book and started reading it to his grandson. And the grandson took the book and said, "That's me. That's me. I'm going to read this." And the grandfather took it back, and the boy took it again and started reading the book and said, "I'm going to read this to my friends. That's me. I'm Mr. Business." And it was the most beautiful thing. So the grandfather drove to Richmond to see me because he was just so impressed at the way his grandson gravitated towards it. He hadn't really fully appreciated the importance of the imagery
Right.
until he had that reaction from his child. And so we get that consistently, so we know we're off to on the right track. We've actually partnered with Lion Forge Animation. They won an Oscar for Hair Love. And we're partnered with them to do some a cartoon version of Mr. Business, maybe for Disney or maybe for Netflix or a company like that, a big distributor. So stay tuned. But we are excited about that series. And then we also wrote a middle school reader called Life in the Middle for kids that are ready for more challenging words and vocabulary and plots. And so we have that book as well. And we partnered with UPenn, which is the #1 graduate school of education in the world. And they do a free curriculum so that if you're homeschooling or if you're at a public school or private school, you can not only get the books, but also get a free curriculum to help you with writing, help the kids with understanding what's in the book, and journaling as well. So we're real excited about that.
So this is a whole series.
Yes.
Right? Yes. And where can we buy those?
Everywhere you buy books, Amazon in particular. They're also on Audible, so if people want to be read to. And then they're also on Caribou.com. And Caribou is the #1 video read sharing app on on Apple and on the internet. And it's also free for veterans. So if you're a veteran, you can get Caribou for free and get all the books. And then you can literally read to a young person from anywhere, even if you're in another country.
Oh,
So that's the beauty. That's the beauty of Caribou.
That's wonderful. So this would be for people who are already serving our nation elsewhere, and they could still have this experience with their child.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, where did you come up with that idea? I love it.
I'm a genius.
I know you are. I didn't know you would say it out loud, but I'm sure that everybody already knew that, because you are a left and a right and then a front and a back brain too. I mean,
hey, look, I'm all over the place.
I know.
You know what it is? I'm happy. I'm happy. It's like when I was listening to the author and talking about Black joy. I mean, Black joy is beautiful, ain't it?
It's real.
It's luxurious. Real. I mean, you can tell when somebody happy. You can tell when somebody ain't happy. But I like it when Black folk feel good. When we feel good, man, we make it rain on everybody. I mean, not like bad rain, like good rain, money or joy, positive. I live every day rejoicing. You know, it's like when I was younger, when you're young, you know, your appreciation of the wind and the breeze has to do with its ability to provide lift to your kite, for example. So you understand nature in that way. But then when you get our age, I ain't gonna say how old we are. No. You get our age, your appreciation for the breeze is just in the fact that it blows. And you know you're alive. And you woke up this morning. And so joy started right there. So everything else is extra gravy. Everything else. So every day I wake up, it's an opportunity to do something. I'm a person, somebody get around me and they all so sad, or I don't like being around them people. I say, all right, bye. You know, I need people to lift me up because I'm that kind of person. I mean, my spouse does that for me. My little Jackie, I call her. I got all kind of nicknames. None of y'all business. I ain't gonna tell y'all what the nicknames are.
I ain't getting into that. That's a whole nother conversation. That's a different show.
Different show, right? But it matters though when you have the right people around you, the right partner with you, and the right mindset. There's nothing that you cannot do. And I don't say that as a kind of axiom, it's just some kind of platitude to sound nice or whatever. It's real.
It is real.
It's real.
And it is real in that, you know, too often we surround ourselves with people that we think that we can trust, that really have our best interests at heart, but too often they're not even interested in your betterment. It's all about them, you know, it's all about them and what they want, they need, they feel. Joyce Meyer says that all the time. And we have to really think about who we have in our circle of influence. It's called a circle of influence for a reason, for us to be able to learn, to grow, to give, to be. It can't be this insular expectation with people that you already know. If people show you who they are, believe them.
Believe them.
The first time.
Right. Right.
Not the second or the third time. Oh, they did that again the first time,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Agree. 100%.
So when you look at your circle of influence, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And I heard a few names that I recognize,
Yeah.
but when we have young people coming, we have young people who are watching this, parents are watching this with their families, I mean, with their kids. How do we, what are four things that you see that seem to have a void that people need to put their attention and with intentionality, right? Their attention and the intentionality behind that. We were talking earlier about the Black joy, Black love, Black, all of these things, but through all this madness that we see on television, how do we navigate that to the point where people can be comfortable with their children being prepared to grow and to be the best that they can of themselves?
Sure. And I don't know if it's four things, but
Okay.
I know that one of the things is pouring love into the people that you care for. And part of the way you do that is with your time.
Mm.
And especially kids are really curious and they need caring adults to be in their lives. It is my view that sharing stories, especially early on, of us achieving and winning is critically important for building character and building the defense mechanisms, but also the offense mechanisms so that our children know how to succeed. Because again, there's very little that's new under the sun. And so what you have to do, though, is expose folk to the blueprints or the remedies or the ways to make or get to one's best life. You can, if you're around a lot of folk and it's always complaining, you're probably going to be a complainer if you take on those mindsets. If you're around someone that's always sad, you're probably going to be today's so miserable kind of person. And so we've got to reprogram ourselves. I used to collect cars, and I remember I had this fancy European car, and this guy pulled up on me at the gas station and said, "Well, is that what I think it is?" I was like, "Well, it depends on what you think it is." He's like, "Is that a Bentley?" I was like, "It is." He's like, "Man, how do I get one of those?" And I'm like, "Go to school and go to work." He was like, "Just like that?" I was like, "Just like that." He's like, "Man, I ain't never think about that. Nobody ever told me that." I was like, "Well, that might be why you don't have one, but you can get one because your grades in school was probably better than mine." And see, that blows their mind because when people see the end result, they assume all A's, went to the best this and the best that, grew up with a silver spoon and all that. Man, I ain't had none of that.
Mhm.
None of that. Almost flunked out of college. Kind of struggled a little bit in high school. Could have done better, but I was under that thing where, you want to act white as if white folk have a moratorium on intelligence. Nonsense. But again, it's because you're reading the wrong books, taking in the wrong information. I didn't know my ancestors built the pyramids. I didn't know my ancestors invented the third rail. I didn't know my ancestors invented lawnmowers, potato chips, force heat, did coding for NASA. I didn't know all that stuff. So then when I started learning that stuff, I had a little different, little pep in my step. When I rode the subway in New York in graduate school, I was like, "This is my subway. My people built this junk." You take on a different attitude, And so I want more of our young people and some grown folks too,
Right.
to know more about who they are. So pouring in that love and helping them to develop a love for self that includes a curiosity, that includes reading, that includes reaching out to the next generation. Because I created my company not because I needed to make movies. I created it because I believe I needed to share these stories in an impactful way. And media is one of the most powerful tools that human beings have at their disposal. And so I said, if I can use this powerful medium
Right.
to infiltrate a confused mind, then I will have done what I believe is my assignment here on this earth.
I think that's it's very strong statement, because too often, you know what, when I grew up, and I keep talking about South Bend, Indiana, East Side, right? Everybody knew everybody, and they knew who lived in what house, and you know, we just knew, right? And you also knew that you could only behave in a certain manner and without being punished forever, right? But how do we today in 2022 have parents looking at the reality of the impact that they give to the children by doing what we are talking about now? How do we get that mindset that this is mandated? This is our whole thing. This is our whole life, our life. I know that too often I wasn't where I needed to be as a parent, right? And doing what I needed to do, not even knowing what I didn't know, because I didn't know what I didn't know. And so, how do we really go about getting parents creating this parental movement in taking that time to help develop this next generation?
Sure.
That's huge.
I think we've got to enlist the help of our ecumenical community. So our churches need to preach it from the pulpit and encourage folk to read books. We need to create traditions around book lists for the summer, book lists throughout the year, continuous education. We need to tell the stories of our successes. Let me give you an example. Okay. So you heard of Mozart and Beethoven and all that, right? What if I told you that the champion fencer in all of Europe in the late 1700s was a brother? Not only was he the champion fencer, he was also a virtuoso on the violin. Marie Antoinette asked him to head the Symphony of France. Mozart went to France to learn from the greats. Joseph Ballon Chevalier de Saint-Georges was the greatest. What if I told you that Saint-Georges created a legion of 1,000 mixed race and African swashbucklers to fight for France and to protect him? One of his lieutenants was T. Alexander Dumas, father of Alexander Dumas, who would go on to write The Count of Monte Cristo and The Three Musketeers. So let me summarize. The cornerstones of French literature, influencer of Mozart, and virtuoso on the violin, prodigy, and the current on-guard stance in fencing, all from the same brother that most people know nothing about.
At all.
At all.
And you heard it here.
These are the kinds of stories that we have to start telling our children. You don't think iconography is important? Stories are important? Why do you think they fought so hard to keep them old crazy Confederate monuments up? Why do you think they fight so hard to keep Christopher Columbus up, even though he ain't never hit America? At all. But what they want to do, because it's important, some people will lie, say, look, we did this, we did that, even if you didn't do it. We could tell the truth and empower our children. Period. And the other thing, our children. And the cool thing is, it's not just for our children. The more people know about it, the more they end up respecting our humanity. You know, but what happens is we've digested and ingested this lie and allowed it to inculcate our being. So all the things you described I'm doing, 7 companies, running this, running that. I wouldn't have been able to do that if my mind had remained limited by the things I was taught with the traditional school system. I had to seek out myself these resources and books and these different kinds of people. I had to go sit down with Nikki Giovanni. She wrote the cover quote on the back of my first book. But once I started getting that right medicine, I got well and I got free. A mind once stretched by a new idea never returns to its original dimensions. What we have to do is pour these new ideas into our young people and love them enough to teach them who we are and who our ancestors were. We didn't start out in humanity as slaves. We were builders and writers and hunters and farmers and created languages. And that stuff is lost to too many.
Yeah.
It's like we've got this long-term amnesia. But I had my awakening, and I believe others will too. And so in the tradition of uplift cinema that predates me, I mean, one of the early film companies was the Frederick Douglass Film Company. A lot of people assume the Lincoln Film Company was the first one. I think that was formed in 1916. The Frederick Douglass Film Company was formed in 1915, right after the birth of a nation, as a response to that, because that movie was racist. It painted us a certain way. And what this one doctor out of New Jersey said was, I didn't want that image to be the prevailing image of Black people.
Right.
So he created a film. His first movie, he did 4 movies. One was A Black Lawyer Wins His Case. Another one was this documentary on World War I, which is probably one of the best World War I documentaries ever. And but he made these films. And then Oscar Micheaux went on to become the grandfather of Black cinema and did over 40 films, I think like 44 films. And actually Virginia was the center of Black cinema for a time when Oscar was in Roanoke, Virginia. I think
Really?
for six years. Yeah. And so it's all this wonderful history that we have access to. And as we access it, more of us will be liberated, and we will do more to lift ourselves, our own communities, and other communities. Because I do believe we've got to pay it forward. And the stuff we're trying to teach is not just teaching Black folk, it's teaching human beings. It's teaching
Period.
everybody.
That's
Because
right.
these stories are our stories. They're everybody's story.
And you're right. The issue is making sure that people really understand that they're everybody's stories. One of the things that I think, and this is keeping with having that information and having our history and being able to access that history on the internet and having that capacity. So you are already here, but we're going to bring it forward to how do we now in 2022, with all the madness that we've dealt with this COVID-19, right? I'm going to go back to the fact that we still have a digital divide. And a lot of the young people that we want to see your work, to read your work, don't have access to be able to do that. And you have a broader view. You're looking at that level where you can see the landscape, right? How do we as a community across this nation deal with the fact that our children could be on the internet buying your books, reading about your books, but they don't have that access? Let's talk about the digital divide in 2022 for a minute, if you don't mind.
Okay. All right.
Because I know you've got you got the history there. So
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've worked with quite a few people, including the person that coined the term the digital divide, Larry Irving.
Yeah.
And followed him at the Department of Commerce, and then he's still a dear friend and was an advisor for many years. He's always been a mentor. Love Larry. He continues to fight the good fight. But definitely making sure that everybody has access to the tools of their time. There was a period when we were growing up where probably encyclopedias was the big way to show that you cared about the knowledge and stuff like that. And every Black folk were working 2 or 3 jobs to get them damn encyclopedias.
I had them right there.
Right there, they did it. And so you went through that phase. Then it was getting the computer and then getting the internet. And then what you started discovering was some communities were getting left out. And so they didn't have the same access to jobs, or the same access to information, et cetera. And so I think that what we have to do is, leverage these phones, leverage the iPads, leverage the digital watches. I mentioned the ecumenical community is important. I think working with some of the traditional groups like urban leagues, NAACPs, other community programs, those are the places where we can get to our young people, and then just make sure that the books in there, the programs in there, the people doing the teaching have a sense of this knowledge. Some people say each one teach one. I've never been a champion of that. because it's not a growth strategy.
Mm.
If I teach one, when I go, that one means it's just, we're staying
May or
level.
may not, right?
We're not growing. But if each one teaches many of you can, if you can do 10 and I can get 5, then all of a sudden when you and I check out, we got, we've 13 to the good. And so we gotta multiply. We can't just die. We gotta multiply. Mm-hmm. I don't know who would have said Bebe's kids. We don't die, we multiply. And so we gotta have a Bebe kids approach.
That's right.
To community enhancement, community engagement. And we all have to spend time, and people got to get in where they fit in. So some people better just give money. Some people don't have the resources, but they can show up with the time and volunteering. Human beings, we're tangible creatures, and so we need people to engage with us. And here's the beauty of it. So human beings retain about 10% of what they see, 50% of what they see and hear, and 80% of what they see, hear, and do. Mm. So when we engage people and give them that experience, then they more likely to retain it and be able to pass it forward. And so, you do media, so mentor in media. I do media and business, so I mentor media and business. And then so folk don't have to get out of their comfort zone per se. In fact, it's my belief that each one of us should do the things we love, and from time to time, invite in somebody we don't usually do that thing with. That's how you bring other communities in. So if you like fishing, your neighbor like fishing, and y'all don't get together much, go fishing. You like Dolly Parton and she like Dolly Parton, go to see Dolly. You like, Lil Nas or 50 Cent, go see 50, go see Snoop, whatever it is.
Right.
And before you know it, the assumptions about the other, start to wash away because you fill in those assumptions with experience-based knowledge and truths, and then hearing from them. And before you know it, you create this ecosystem of support and mutual respect. And we've got to start with ourselves with that. Too often you go in a place, and I've been in places, and it ain't been the person who don't look like me that's giving me the drama. It's the person that look like me. And it's a crazy thing.
What is that called?
I don't know what color struck some people call it, but I don't know. But it ain't nice. And
why does that happen?
I think it happens because what they say: familiarity breeds contempt. Mm. And so you assume that you can act a certain way, be a certain way with people from the same community. And it's fine if that's a positive. It's fine if that's built in respect and uplift. But it's not fine if you feel like it's your opportunity to take out whatever microaggression or frustration on your brother or your sister. That ain't cool.
I think it's very interesting that you brought that up because, I don't understand the fact that we all have melanin in our skin. We all have melanin in our skin. We all have melanin. There's a rainbow of melanin, right, in that skin tone. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, even if you are passing to get what you want, at some point somebody's going to know. Mm-hmm. And then the reality of what that pretense is about is going to be even deeper in what you thought you could manage that you will not be able to manage. If the lid is off, then you've got to now deal with a circumstance that you don't even know how to deal with. And I know several people who are like that have lived their lives a lie.
Yeah. Sometimes it's hard dealing with situations where your authentic self is not appreciated. Mm-hmm. And so people do what you're describing as passing, and some people do that. Some people, you hear kids talking about acting white and stuff like that. So what I try to do is not spend too much time dealing with those things. They're real things. But what I try to do instead is figure out where I want somebody to go, and then what's the building blocks or scaffolding to get them there. So that's why I tell people to pick 3 or 4 people that they respect, and then see what they did on their journey to success and follow what they did. So that way I don't get into all the peculiarities of a live human person. And it's dynamic. I mean, what's your upbringing? What was your neighborhood? What's the vibe where you're in your faith tradition? Do you have a faith tradition? I mean, it's a whole lot of things that impact who we are and who we become. But when I tell a young person to pick people they respect, I don't hit the resistance if I spoon feed them my top 3. So you pick your top 3, but pick somebody who's done pick somebody who's done something. And then you start looking at what they did, and they finished high school. They likely finished college. They worked in these kind of careers. Because then I put the challenge on, because the challenge is this, and it's always the same answer. The win is in the work. You get to have the life you're willing to work for. You're willing to invest in. And so my kids are just, getting into a level of maturity now where I feel like a lot of the lessons that I tried to teach are starting to stick. And so I'm happy, because I was wondering. But I'm so proud of them. And everybody's either in school or working. So God is good. And so we all go through stuff, and we get it at different times. And what I'm trying to do now is accelerate that. Now that I know more. And I'm actually going back, Marsha, and reading some books that I read when I was younger, but I'm reading them with 50-year-old eyes versus 20-year-old eyes. And more so than how old are the eyes, how mature is the brain? And so I'm reading them with the different level of maturity. So I'm picking up different insights. So when I reread the autobiography of Malcolm X, or Let the Trumpet Sound about Dr. King, I can appreciate their walk differently in the iteration of myself that I am at this point.
That's right.
And so, just got a new agent. And so I have a new book coming out later in the year called Love's Insurrection. And I like love. So it's a book about love. You had asked me about the movie. So the movie with Bruce Willis and Leon and Frank Grillo and Kevin Dillard is called A Day to Die. We filmed it in Jackson, Mississippi, and it's out in theaters, digital, and on demand. So if you have any kind of cable service, you just go to your on demand menu, pull it right up. Also Vudu, and then select theaters. If you go to the website that you have up there, Soulidifly.com, click on films, all our movies and trailers and everything pops up. You talked about our stage production. So our first stage production was Thoughts of a Colored Man, and it was the #1 new show on Broadway. I mean, so if you're gonna be a bear, be a grizzly. So we came out swinging, and had the good fortune to work with the illustrious Ron Simons from Simon Says Production. And Ron has like 4 Tonys. He's like more Tonys than any African American alive. And so if you're gonna jump into Broadway with somebody, go with the star. And we've been fortunate enough to align ourselves with people who know what they're doing. We bring our own value. In our company, we've got Monty Ross, who co-founded 40 Acres and a Mule with Spike Lee. We've got Keon Martin, who helped to found the original Movie Pass, also understudied under the late Joel Schumacher and Martin Scorsese. We got Nick Powell, who's an honor student from VCU, great writer. He does a lot of the writing for our Soul Vision magazine. And everywhere I go, I try to find talent, and especially underappreciated talent. And then I pour into them to help them to be the best version of themselves and to show the world what they're working with. And it's been a formula for success.
Well, clearly a success. This is really wonderful. And, I think too often we don't know where we're going, right? But life happens. And so all of these wonderful, incredible opportunities. Give me a couple of things that were like aha moments where you saw that there was a new trajectory that you were going to go in.
Well, I mean, when ABC, NBC, Nightline, CBS called about our show Thoughts of a Colored Man, and there was like an 8-minute special on Nightline on our show, I was like, wow, okay, this is real stuff right here. This ain't play. When Deborah Roberts reached out after I did a commencement address talking about some of this history, and she said, this is going viral. And then Maria Shriver reached out and they had me to write something for her Sunday paper publication. That was a moment. When we won the National Book Award for A Tale of the Tea, and I co-wrote it with a Jewish author on purpose because I wanted to show the power of honest conversations to heal. And, that was my first nonfiction book, and for it to win a National Book Award ain't too shabby.
Not at
And
all.
so we're doing everything with a certain level of excellence. So what I've learned to tell people is to do great. Just be excellent out the box and do great things. And if for some reason you can't do great things, do small things in a great way.
I like that. Say that one more time.
Do great things. And when you can't do great things, do small things in a great way. And when those kind of ideas become your philosophy, it's hard to miss. You might miss some here or there, but if you always working and being excellent and doing your best, guess what? God and the ancestors show up and fill in the gaps. That's a beautiful thing about faith. And that's what living longer teaches you, is that you don't have to have all the answers. You just got to show up and do your best. And then God and the ancestors pick up the rest.
So we only have a couple of minutes left.
Okay.
And I'd like for you to give us some parting words about visioning in future and authenticity.
Okay. I think one of the best things I can leave people with is to write down your dreams and ideas in a little plan. Write it down and go to work. That will make all the difference. Don't just talk about it. Be about it. The win is in the work.
The win is in the work. Right. Because you have to work. You can't just
sit around and wait for it to happen. Yeah.
It's not coming in there.
It's not coming.
You're going to sit here just like this. Well, where is it?
Right.
Not happening. So, B. Keith, thank you so much for coming. And I want to know, how long are we still going to be able to see the new movie that's out? It's out, and you said it's all on television, on cable, and all these other places. Say it one more time.
Yes.
Yeah, and that we can get videos.
So it's in theaters, and it's on digital, and it's on all the cable platforms. So it'll be there for a while. So you'll be able to see it. The theatrical run will probably be a few more weeks. And then, but the digital run and the on-demand run is pretty much evergreen.
That's amazing. You have two big things going on at the same time. Broadway and in a theater near you, right?
That's it. Why not?
I love it. B. Keith Fulton, CEO and Chairman and CEO of Soulidifly Productions. Thank you so much for B. Keith for taking the time to come. I really appreciate it. And I'm so proud of you. You've just done wonderful things, and you're changing how we see ourselves in the world.
Well, I appreciate that. And thank you for having me. Your show is healing and making a difference. So keep it up.
Thank you, sir. Will do.
All right.
Take care.
You too now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for watching. We were with B. Keith Fulton, and I'm just really excited about it. This has been a wonderful, wonderful show, and we're really tickled. I want you to go and get Black Joy with Tracey Michae'l Lewis-Giggetts, and we need to go to the movies and see where you can go in your city to see Bruce Willis and that whole movie that's out now, and Broadway. So go to Soulidifly, the website, and you'll be able to find everything that they have, all of the books. Thank you, Katanya. Solidify.com, and you'll see where all of his books, all of his movies, everything that he's been doing. And I'm sure that you'll enjoy most of that. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Katanya Lester, our producer. And thank you, BlackUSA.News, for all the stuff that we're doing here. And don't forget to watch us on www.stemcity.com. Oh, wait, it's StemCityUSA.com. So thank you very much, and hope that you'll come back again this time next week at 7 o'clock on Tuesdays. Have a good evening. Bye.